I'm here to introduce Ray to you. Thank you for being here, Ray. Ray is a retired fish management biologist with a lifelong interest in natural history. He started birding in the 6th grade when he did a bird diary of bird observations for extra credit. He's been a birder ever since, though he claims to be at the same novice level as he was back then. I don't believe it. For 4 years, Ray was president of the Salem Audubon Society as they worked with the Fish and Wildlife Service to build Ankeny Hills Nature Center. He and his wife, Stephanie Hazen, live east of Salem on nearly 2 acres that they manage for native vegetation in support of native birds, bees, butterflies, and moths. In 2013, Ray and Stephanie took over a route of monitored bird nest boxes intended to contribute to bluebird conservation, known as a bluebird trail, on 3 local farms. Currently, they manage about 80 nest boxes that are used by tree and violet green swallows, bluebirds, slender-billed white-breasted nuthatches, house wrens, chickadees, house sparrows, and assorted non-avian tenants. They annually clean, repair, and replace or relocate boxes as needed, as well as monitoring mortalities. Ray has constructed most of the boxes now in use, using nest box designs that have evolved to serve the birds well and be efficient in their construction. The information Ray will present today reflects more than a decade of learning by problem solving and observation in the field.
We've actually been taking care of 80 boxes on some bluebird trails since about 2013, I think. We moved into our property here in 2011, put up a wood duck nest box. Screech owl moved in. I took that as an omen, started building bird boxes, and we're still doing that. And the screech owl's still with us. So let's look at legal status here for a bit. What you're going to see in nest boxes are native cavity nesting birds. There's federally protected, dead or alive, eggs, chicks, and adults are all included. You're also going to see non-native house sparrows and starlings. They're not protected by law, and they are serious pests in your bird boxes. And the nests of native species aren't protected once the birds are out of them. So here are the 2 birds pests that you're going to typically see. They're both nest parasites. Starlings will drive native birds out of their nest boxes, and house sparrows will actually get in and kill chicks and throw the eggs out. So you really don't want these guys reproducing. House sparrows tend to be more abundant in city areas. We're seeing them spreading here to one of the farms that we have nest boxes on, because there are residences that border the property where the boxes are, and those folks feed, I think, indiscriminately in the yard, and the sparrows move on to our boxes. It's really difficult to get rid of them. If you live in town or even out in the country, look around. If there are house sparrows around your neighborhood, you may not want to put up boxes for bluebirds or swallows, because bluebirds and swallows can use those boxes. So, who nests in tree cavities? Well, it's pretty much this list that you see, plus a few other birds. And tree cavities come in a lot of forms. These are made by woodpeckers. These happen to be in our front yard, other than the one in the middle. And we've had chickadees and woodpeckers nesting in these. So who nests in bird boxes? Well, it's pretty much the same crew. The trick here is to have a bird box that's suitable for the birds you're trying to attract, have the right nest openings into them, and are in the right habitat. So we'll look at some of those as we go along here today. The lesson from this slide is there are a whole lot of species out there that nest in cavities. Most of those will take nest boxes some of the time. Here's some examples. The one on the lower left, of course, is a bluebird. This is in a shed in the neighborhood. The one on the upper left are swallows. They're fighting over a dilapidated bird box. It's on Chickahominy Reservoir in eastern Oregon. And the one in the upper right is a slender-billed white-breasted nuthatch, the endemic subspecies here in the valley. And it's moving a fecal sac out of the nest. They keep the nest clean that way. And in the bottom is Fred the screech owl. who for 9 of the last 10 or 11 winters has lived in the wood duck box. Not the same owl, certainly, but a screech owl, and they're all named Fred. And he's back. He came last month, and we still have him around. So why nest boxes in the first place? Well, clearly, the main reason for nest boxes is they're surrogates for the dwindling total of natural cavities that are out on the landscape these days. The only place I know to reliably go see tree swallows nesting in their native habitat is at Ridgefield Refuge in Washington. So bird boxes fill in some of the slack and aid conservation. They will also bring birds to habitats that are otherwise suitable but can't support it very much reproduction. We have 20 boxes around a pond in Marion County that produces usually at least one brood of swallows or bluebirds for each box around the pond. Around that area, there isn't suitable habitat to bring that many nesting pairs around. And in the wintertime, birds can take shelter in roost boxes. So the other reason for nest boxes is it's really cool to bring birds into your yard where you can look at them. You get to see behaviors around courting and nesting, fledging, care of the young you wouldn't otherwise see. I think it's a pretty good gateway, especially for young people, to become curious about and start enjoying nature. If you have a bird box with swallows or bluebirds or whatever, they get to be neighbors. So we also are reading a lot in the science magazines and newsletters these days about mental health benefits of being out in nature. I think those same benefits accrue when you're sitting out watching the birds go through their life history in bird boxes that you've provided for them. So a couple of images bringing birds home, bringing birds to our homes. The one on the left, obviously, is a bluebird family. They're sitting on the deck rail of the deck we had years ago, and the male is feeding mealworms to the chick. And this couple went on to have 2 more broods that summer. So 3 broods in the summer is pretty unusual. And the slide that you saw in Sarah's introduction is the one here on the right. It's a male kestrel as a mouse. He's trying to entice a female kestrel to mate. So we've seen 2 outcomes from this. This couple actually did mate and raise chicks in the box behind them. But we were also treated to a male kestrel who, for several days, brought mice to a female kestrel who said, no, it's not really good enough. They finally split up and went away. But we got to see all that because there was a nest box for them. A couple more pretty dark slides. The one on the left is Fred the screech owl in some iteration, coming back to the nest box, bringing food. The one on the right is a recently fledged screech owl chick sitting on the ironwork at our deck. One summer, we slept out on the deck for about 2 weeks, surrounded by 3 of these guys who sat around on the deck rail and up on the ironwork and elsewhere, called for their parents. You could hear the frequency and the intensity of the cries going up as they realized an adult was coming with food. Again, it was a magical moment that only occurred because we had nest boxes up for screech owls. So the point of this talk really is, what's it all about? How do you go about selecting a nest box, putting it up, taking care of it? What kind of maintenance are you signed up for once you do that? So over the next several slides, we'll have a look at some answers to those questions. And in the meantime, I'll put in a plug for building your own nest boxes. It's something I certainly find interesting to do. Gives you lots of room to innovate, change designs, whatever. I like to use them, put them up on our property, donate them, sell them to Marion SWCD for plant sales. They're an aid to bird conservation. They also give me a lot of satisfaction when I see the results, birds being produced in boxes that I made. It does put you at risk of having to give talks, however. These are three references that I like quite a bit. The woodworking for wildlife is from Minnesota, and the landscaping for wildlife is from the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. And the Audubon Birdhouse book is a much newer version. It has some designs in it that we don't typically see here. It's a good book to have. It's a good reference. And at the end of this presentation, you'll see some online links too that will take you to more information about bird boxes than you can ever wade through. And I heard Sarah say you're going to get a copy of those and references to these books after the talk. So most of the bird boxes that we see and deal with are variations on a basic design, which is a rectangular cross section, has a roof, has a bottom, has sides, and has a front. If you get the Audubon book, or if you look at birdhouse designs from bluebird fanciers in the East, you'll see quite radically different designs. So looking at those, you can't tell scale, unfortunately, here. But the little box on the upper left is a wren box. It probably has 1.25 inch opening in it. The one down below that is an old veteran swallow and bluebird box that has produced quite a few broods with a 1.5 inch hole in it. The one on the top center is a kestrel box on our property, which has produced 3 broods of kestrels. The bottom one is a pretty standard looking wood duck box that I made some modifications in. And the one on the right is a flicker box. Flickers and chickadees like to go in and excavate as a part of courtship. So these tall, narrow, deep boxes can be filled with pine shavings or cedar shavings, and the male bird comes along and excavates out of that. And you can tell when they're doing it because there'll be a big spread of shavings on the ground. So some specialty bird boxes. The one on the upper left is a purple martin box, and this is quite different than most purple martin boxes that you see in the literature that tend to be multi-chambered apartment house kinds of things. These were developed and used in British Columbia as part of their purple martin restoration program. The martins have taken to them. We have friends up the Santiam who have some boxes similar to these. They hold martins as well. The one below is a barn owl box. It has 2 chambers. The nesting chamber is partially screened from the entrance hole, so predators going up the tree looking in there can't reach in and grab a chick. It's a pretty successful design, I think. The one top center is a nest box, a nest ledge for robins or for barn swallows, both of which make mud nests. The one below that is a design from Alberta. It's a winter roost box for small owls. Our small owls don't pay any attention to it, but the chickadees like it quite a bit. And the remaining 3 are a box I conjured up because I wanted to be able to give Salem Audubon house wren and nuthatch nests for display, but those nests are amorphous. There's no real structure to them. If you take them out of a box, they fall apart. So I conjured up this box and made it. It has plexiglass on the top and on one side. Put them out in a stand of oak trees, and we captured this house wren nest that you see down in the lower picture. And we also captured some nuthatch nest boxes. So this is just cool, and because I made it, I thought I'd put it in. So we're about to go through some checklist of basic features here to look at for most any box. Sometimes online, especially and in the stores, you'll see a lot of these very colorful, sometimes very whimsical nest boxes, ostensibly intended for birds. Some of them are fine, some of them are not. So if you're interested in this kind of yard art, think about some of the design qualities that we'll be talking about here over the next few slides. But the basic features are the nest hole needs, an entry hole needs to be the right size for the bird you want. You have to be able to clean it out, and it's nice if it's vented. So if you don't get birds, you might still get bumblebees, which is not a bad thing. So desirable design elements. Um, right size box for the birds, right size entry holes. Don't put external perches on boxes. You may find designs for that favors primarily house sparrows. Uh, native birds don't need them. They do just fine going in and out of a hole with no perch. So this is one of the cedar boxes I make. The boxes ought to be made with something durable. Cedar's a good choice out in this part of the country, but the rough side of the wood inside. They need to have doors that open, and openable doors need to have latches on them. And we'll look at that in a bit, and they need to be vented. So entries to fit the bird. Uh, Fundamentally, we typically have generically songbird boxes like the ones you see here, uh, with 1.25 inch round holes. They could be down to 1 inch and you'll still get wrens. But these will serve chickadees, nuthatches, and wrens quite nicely, and they'll keep out house sparrows. For bluebirds and swallows, 1.5 inch hole works just fine. It'll keep out starlings, but it won't keep out house sparrows. For flickers, one of the recommendations is this 2.5 by 3.25 oval. For screech owls and kestrels, 3-inch round holes work just fine. And if you look in the references, you'll see information about other oval nest hole shapes, slotted nest holes, and diamond shapes. So one of the must-do things with bird boxes is must have a door, and it must be openable and latchable. You have to get into it and clean it, and you have to seal the box back up to keep the birds in and critters out. So I like a top opening box, but many of them open on the side, some open on the bottom. They all work. So it's good to have vents. There's no magic number for how many square inches of vents that I know of. Vent them. Put in vents on the sides and over the door if you can do that, or at least on the sides. Extend the roofs out so they protect the vents from the rain and protect the entryway from the rain. You'll find plans for boxes that have predator guards. Most of those are internal to the box. I've built some of those. I've never really liked them. They get in the way of the chicks getting out. And I don't think we have many predators here that are going to get into the bird boxes other than perhaps raccoons and maybe cats. So what you're wanting to do is separate the predator from the chicks. And in this box, the way it's done is the cross piece at the top of the door adds an extra 3/4 inch layer. So anything reaching into that hole is reaching through 1.5 inch deep opening. Um, that's pretty tough to do when you're a raccoon or a cat and you're trying to reach your hand down there. So as a useful design component, it's easy to integrate into the plan. I don't think these are necessary. It's a personal choice. I like to do it. It works for the bird boxes I like to build. Let's talk about where to put the box once you have one. First thing is the more you know about the bird you're after and its habitats and its breeding biology, the better luck you're going to have. So the big unwritten rule, if you're trying to capture swallows or bluebirds, is keep them out of house wren habitat. So house wren habitat is that cool understory you see under the oak stands or down the riparian corridors, down fence rows. It tends to be brushy, small trees. Um, we'll get to house wrens here in a minute. Put them in natural shade if you can. These boxes do heat up in the sun. If you can put them in under a tree with plenty of open space for the birds to come and go, protect the birds at least part of the day, and especially from the hot midday sun, it's a big help. So you also want to mount your boxes securely. And despite what you may read, they don't need to be 20 feet up in the trees. So house wrens. So this brushy, shrubby habitat that you see here in the picture is pretty typical house wren habitat. They will take over boxes. They will fill them with sticks. They'll nest in one. And if there's a bluebird family or a swallow family in one, they will kill the chicks and turf out the eggs. That was the first place we experienced house wrens here. We watched a house wren throw tree swallow eggs onto the ground out of the nest box while the panicked tree swallow parents were flying around. So house wrens kill chicks and eggs, and they're a protective species. So if you have house wrens, you pretty much have house wrens in the box. Let it go until fall when you can clean the box out. And then you can either leave it for the house wrens, which are pretty cool little animals, or you can move the box someplace into better bluebird or swallow habitat. This picture on the right is a house wren nest. It's built over a bluebird nest. You can see the straw nest at the bottom. That's a pretty typical bluebird nest. And then the house wren came along and filled it up with sticks. So on one of the nests that we manage, a house wren moved in, and when we cleaned nest boxes in the summer, I counted the sticks. So they're little sticks like these, and there were 1,782 of them. That's a lot of trips, one at a time, in the beak of a small bird. So in midsummer, or if we have some of those spectacularly hot days like we had a couple of years ago, it gets pretty warm inside these boxes. There's not a lot of good literature about the lethal or sublethal temperatures for these birds. Most of it's based on chicken chicks, and the lethal temperature there, as I recall, is about 106 degrees. So putting these boxes in natural shade doesn't get you past the ambient temperature, but it does get you past much of the radiant heat that's coming from the sun and heating the boxes. The picture that you see here on the left is an absolutely ideal spot for bluebirds. It's under this big oak tree. It looks out in open country where they can feed on the ground. And the bluebirds get good feeding territory. They get moderation of the temperature by that tree. That particular box has produced a bunch of broods of bluebirds over the years. So in extreme weather, one of the workarounds is to put foil on bird boxes, especially bluebird boxes, I think. Foil reflects the radiant heat. You still are at mercy of whatever the air temperature is, but it reflects radiant heat. It only works once those birds are invested in eggs and chicks. Otherwise, they'll avoid it like the plague, contrary to what you're trying to do. But if you ever do foil a box, don't put it around the opening. The birds will not go in there. Let's look at some locations, some habitats where you might find these birds. If you want to put up boxes for wrens, nuthatches, or chickadees, these brushy edges, oak stands, riparian corridors, fence rows. I mean, here in the valley, we have a zillion miles of this kind of habitat. Put a box in there at the edge of it or put it deep into it. The birds will find it and they'll certainly use it. Those are all native birds. They're good. It's good conservation to help them find places to live. For swallows, the best place in the world you can get is a wetland, a marsh, um, a place that produces aquatic insects. Swallows catch insects in the air. They don't feed on the ground. So a field, a wetland, ponds, open spaces that will produce flying insects, provide food for swallows. Tree swallows and violet greens are pretty sociable. If you look at the picture in the middle, uh, two boxes on a fence post, both of those may get used by swallows, not by bluebirds. They need a clear flight path like you see at the picture of the box that's on the post and the box that's on the tree. And again, here we have not a nest box, but a nest ledge for barn swallows or robins, which are handy to have someplace where you have mud for them. These boxes really aren't intended to be out in the open rain, so it's good to put them under the eaves or put them inside an RV cover or a shed or some other kind of cover. Locations for bluebirds. Bluebirds feed on the ground. They eat invertebrates, so they're looking for open spaces that they can get out in safely. They need a clear flight path coming into their box. There's a rule of thumb among the bluebird folks that boxes need to be spaced at 100 yards. With the topography here in the valley and the oak stands and open spaces, I think you can get bluebird boxes a lot closer to that. All you need to do is get them out of line of sight. And bluebirds are easily attracted to feeders. If you want to put out mealworms or suet, especially when they're nesting and feeding young, they certainly will come to them. So the picture on the right is a pretty cool location. There's a nice stand of oaks back there. There's an open pasture. It's not a bad looking spot for bluebirds at all. So you'd put the nest box out 100 feet or so from the edge of that oak stand, because if you put it back there, the house wrens are going to move in and take over. So best way to deal with house wrens is avoidance. So here we are with mounting your boxes. Most boxes, have some kind of mount built into them or added to them and can be screwed onto a tree. The picture at the top with the pond in the background is a bluebird box that's on a T-post, a steel T-post. The picture at the right is a handy way of putting a box on a T-post. Those are 1¼ inch EMT straps with a stop at the top. That'll just sleeve down over the T-post. So going across the bottom and on the pond, these are demonstrating heights of boxes. The literature will tell you for a lot of birds, they need to be way up in a tree someplace. The problem with that is cleaning boxes way up in a tree someplace doesn't happen all that often. So the box on the left is a bluebird swallow box in our backyard. I can touch the bottom of it standing on the ground. The next one is a screech owl box. The north end of our property, I can touch the bottom of that one standing on the ground. The one after that is a kestrel box, and again, I can touch the bottom of that one. They don't have to be up high. You need to have open flight space in front of them, but they don't need to be up high. And if you don't put them up high, then you can avoid things like this fellow, me, standing on top of a ladder wrestling with a barn owl box. Just really not very smart. So nest box management, this is what you signed up for when you put the box up. So if somebody moves in, good. But don't open the box once they have eggs or chicks. There's a real danger, especially as you get near fledging time. You open the box, those fledglings are eager to get out. They're going to jump out. You won't be able to catch them, and they're not ready to survive on their own yet. So again, one more time, clean all the boxes every year. Sometimes you get surprised. That's part of the novelty. Leave the boxes up for winter and repair them as needed. So nest box cleaning. This is a more or less typical swallow nest. You can see it has a lot of feathers in it. It has grass in it. It has something else. I don't know what the black stuff is necessarily, but the top layer is fecal material. These boxes almost always are really, really dirty. So you clean them out in the fall after nesting season, which is pretty much August into October before the fall rains start. It's optimistically nice to clean them again in March and turf out the spiders, mice, whatever might have taken up winter residence, but I don't get around to that very often. Anyway, you want to get the nest out of there before the rains. The boxes tend to let in enough water that the nest gets soggy and they're not healthful for the birds. And by doing that, you're leaving an open nest for the winter use by the birds. We sometimes find these in the spring. There'll be lots of fecal material on the bottom of the box where birds have been standing around in there in the winter. So winter shelter comes in, a variety of forms. Obviously, the hog wire on the back of our garage here in the left is not a nest box, but birds do flock to things like that in the wintertime. That's a north-facing exposure. So this picture in the center, though, is two old nest boxes that I've hung up inside our RV cover. They're facing south toward a solid wall. There's plenty of open airspace for birds to come and go, but they're protected from the wind, the south wind and the rain. And then again, we see that owl shelter box from Alberta up in one of our ash trees. So nest cleaning is a serious deal, probably increasingly so. Bird poop contains aspergillus, which is a fungus, and a bunch of bacterial pathogens, and you really don't want to breathe it. Bird flu may complicate that too. So use a respirator just like we wore back in COVID days, or a mask like we wore back in COVID days, or a respirator. Throw the mask away. Don't bring them in the house. Wear gloves. Clean up all your gear outside the house someplace, and clean yourself up after you've been out taking care of boxes. So this is my maintenance toolkit. It's pretty basic. Um, the black thing that you see laying on the data book is a paint scraper. I happen to have several of those. They happen to work just fine for pulling old nests out, and for scraping off fecal material in swallow nests. And there's a mask. Um, and there are gloves. If you're going to be out in the back 40 cleaning out bird boxes and whatnot, might as well take repair tools with you. Some of the time, all that's needed is something you can do with a hammer or a screwdriver. So, what could go wrong? Well, first thing that could go wrong is nobody likes your nest box. Nobody finds it. Nobody uses it. In good habitat, you probably will get most of your nest boxes used by swallows here in the valley, and some by bluebirds. In town, it's a little harder. Your boxes need to be in a place where the birds exist, or at least they pass through and are able to see them. Anyway, we'll get into that more in a moment. But hot weather can be an issue. House wrens, starlings, house sparrows in the boxes is an issue. Bumblebees are kind of cool. Mice sometimes live in them. Sometimes there's some other thing. If you don't get any birds in your new nest box, if they're common birds like swallows and bluebirds, maybe you're just not in the right spot. So take a look at the habitat descriptions for these guys and see how well you're matching that. For wrens, chickadees, and nuthatches, if it's in brushy habitat someplace or shrubby habitat in your yard, just leave it. They'll come along. For the bigger, less common birds like screech owls and kestrels, you may have a box up for years and never have anybody in it, or you could put a box up today and somebody would move in. You never know. I think the best thing you can do is put the boxes up and leave them. and wait for the birds to come along. So for no species, you get every box used every year. So again, we're back to a protected species that is a nest parasite that will do damage to bluebirds and swallows and can easily take over a bluebird or swallow nest box and either drive out the occupants or just fill it up with sticks so it can't be used. You don't have a lot of choices here. They're protected birds, and it may just mean your box is in the wrong spot for bluebirds and swallows. So you can clean the box out and move it after nesting season if you want to put it out in different habitat, or you can leave it and enjoy the house wrens. I think one year here we had 6 or 7 broods of house wrens scattered over the property. So house sparrows especially are a much harder beast to deal with. They're unprotected. You can dump out the nests, you can kill the eggs, you can kill the adults. So at least dump out the nest and then close the box up or remove it. And next season, put the box someplace else, or don't put up a sparrow bluebird sized box. These are all kind of tough choices if you're thinking about killing birds or eggs or dumping nests or whatever. Do what you feel comfortable doing, but try not to let them reproduce on your property in your nest boxes. If you're really, really lucky, you may get bumblebees in one of your bird boxes. Um, this is cool. They're uncommon. We've had a couple. Um, these are native creatures too, so you're aiding bee conservation if they do move in and you allow them to run out their life history there. The ones you're likely to get are black-tailed bumblebees. They're real aggressive and they sting. So enjoy them at a distance. And the nest will be used. They'll all be dead by late summer sometime. You can clean it out, curate it, whatever you want to do. So all kinds of other things like nest boxes too. Um, Mice come in mainly over the winter. So if you clean boxes in the spring, you may see mice where you left an empty box in the fall. Wasps, like these little wasps that you see in the right-hand picture, that small comb, those come in mainly in summer in boxes that don't get used by birds. Anytime the box is empty for a period of time, you could have spiders in it. It's pretty simple to turf them out. So all these things need to be removed if you want birds to use the box. The other cool thing is in the lower right-hand part of the right-hand image is a torus, a donut-shaped nest made of plant fibers, and I have no idea what it is. So it's always fun to find something new and different out there. These links are from credible organizations. Nestwatch, I think, is from Cornell University, and I think All About Birds is as well. And Cialis is a site that has an immense amount of information about bluebirds and a lot about other cavity nesters as far as designs, managing boxes, placing boxes, all that good stuff. So if you explore these links, you're going to find a lot of really good curated information. And you'll also get this information after the talk. So that's the end of the line for this bird box, and I think for me, more than I know about bird boxes already. So I think, Sarah, we can take easy questions.
Um, all boxes pictured are made of wood. Do boxes made of composite material attract birds?
I don't have much experience here with composite materials, but I think the answer is if the box is otherwise suitable, yes. It still has to have a door for clean out. It still has to have the right size of holes. It's probably best if it isn't black or dark gray or some other color that's going to heat up. We have friends who have on their farm nest boxes or surrogate nests made of cement for uh, cliff swallows and some other surrogate boxes for martins, and they get used. So I would say if that appeals to you, try one. But again, use the list of desirable characteristics to scope out whether you think, regardless of its material, it would be a good bird box.
Thanks, Ray. So from Sue, we have one. Where can we find specific nesting time frames for different birds?
If you go to the All About Birds link from Cornell, you'll find all the information you need about nesting times and behaviors and whatnot. So for the birds we're talking about here today, at least for the swallows and bluebirds, in March they're looking, and in April they're nesting probably. For the screech owls, uh, they're courting right now, have been courting, and they're nesting or will be nesting. You don't want to be disturbing their boxes early. Try those links, and I think you'll find the timing information that you need.
I have a question for you, Ray.
Go for it.
I have a wood duck box that was here when I bought the property. It's really, really high up there. I've never cleaned it out because I don't want to break my neck to do so. Should I consider taking it down?
I would take it down and put it up about 6 or 8 feet high.
Yeah. Is
You
it
may,
is it bad if I leave it there and don't clean it out? Like, is it spreading diseases? Is it just not getting used?
I have no idea what its history might be, uh, but the best thing for it would be to clean it out and take it down, or just leave it and put up a different one that's only 6 or 8 feet high.
All right, so we have another one from Sue. How about Buick's wrens and chickadees here in the Willamette Valley? Do you know their nesting times?
I typically put up boxes and don't pay too much attention to exactly when they're nesting, but I think April probably for both of those. But again, that's easy information to find online. And I don't know. Salem Audubon may have some resources that will provide you with that information.
Okay, and from Lee, we have what is a good book that would identify the local birds?
There's a book called Birds of the Pacific Northwest by John Shuey and Tim Blunt, which has photos and other descriptive information in it. It's quite handy. It's a soft cover. So the Peterson's Western Birds will have all of our local birds. Salem Audubon has a couple of books that have Western Oregon birds, I think, but Shuey and Blunt's book is a very good one to have.
Wonderful, thank you. Let's see, the next one's from Heidi. You mentioned that March is okay to clean out prior to nesting. If cleaning now, the birds won't have already been set on one and get disturbed.
Not that I see here, not so far. The later it gets in March, the more probability it is. But swallows haven't arrived yet, and the bluebirds haven't shown any inclination toward nesting behavior. So the only thing I've seen really showing an inclination toward nesting right now is house sparrows.
So Linda asks, when cleaning the box, do you just remove the contents or do you also use some kind of soap to remove the dirt, fecal matter, etc.?
No, I think you're best off keeping it dry. Pull out the old nest and use a paint scraper or something like that to carefully break out and pull out the fecal material. And you're never going to get it clean in the sense, if you went into it and scrubbed it out with soap, yeah, you might get it clean. That's not very practical when you're out cleaning bird boxes. There's always going to be some left, but you're intending to get out everything that might attract water, everything that might spread pathogens. So scraping out the bottom, scraping out the sides for fecal material, I think is pretty important. If it's a bluebird nest, it's going to come out clean grass, and when the nest is gone, the box will be clean. It's really simple. Most all of these birds, except swallows, have pretty clean nest boxes once you get the old nest out. But I would avoid scraping with a brush, avoid standing downwind of the box, the usual stuff. You really don't want to breathe that.
It looks like we're done. Perfect timing. Thank you so much, Ray, for joining us today, and thanks for everyone that came to the talk. And we will have it up on YouTube. I'm not sure how long that usually takes, but it won't be too long. And we'll send an email out to folks with the resources that Ray shared.
All right. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, thanks, Ray. Thanks, everybody.